Welcome to the mixing module. This module will take 2 weeks, and the first week we will talk about the basics. We will talk about mixing with the stems, which will allow us to simplify orchestral mixing and doing it in a very effective way. And then we will talk about compression, reverb, and EQ. After that, we will talk about automation, which is a very effective technique that is not complex at all and doesn't require using any fancy plugins, but it does make a big difference. For the second week, we will grab those concepts that we learned in the first week, and we will go a little bit more specific. We will talk about mixing for strings, mixing for brass and woodwinds, mixing for percussion. Then we will go a little bit more complex, and we will learn some specific reverb and delay techniques that will allow us to expand our mixing depth. After that, we will see the stems of some soundtracks, and we will be able to hear just the mixed strings, the mixed brass, the mixed percussion, mixed synths, etc. And that will allow us to have like a frame of reference when we are mixing our own stems. Finally, we will talk about mastering, and we will learn about the specific plugin chain and how to set them up so our music sounds loud and it sounds professional no matter what system we are playing it back. Mixing with the stems. First of all, let's define what's an stem. An stem basically it's exporting a group of tracks as a one audio track. Okay, let's define this a little bit more in depth. When we are composing, right? When we are composing, we are in our sequencer, and we've got our samplers and our patches loaded there, and we've got maybe 60, 80 tracks at the end of the queue. We've used violins 1, violins 2, etc. And then we've got the long notes, staccatos. So we've got plenty of tracks. It's a rather complex sequence there project. Now, when we are mixing, what we will do is export all that information to audio tracks, and then grab those audio tracks and import them in a new project. Okay, in the sequencer, we will open a new project and we will import those tracks. Now, if we've got, let's say, if we've used 80 tracks, do we have to export those 80 tracks? Well, we could export those 80 tracks, but sometimes, most of the times, it won't make that big of a difference having every track converted as an audio file and imported in a new sequence for us to mix. And there's a simplified way that still will give us flexibility when it comes to mixing, but definitely it'll simplify the process a lot, and still it'll be very efficient. And that's exporting stems. Instead of exporting tracks, individual tracks, it's exporting stems. And we already have everything set up for exporting stems. Remember when we set up all those buses? Those buses were there, so we can export the stems in just one pass. Okay, so again, a stem. What's an stem? An stem is basically bouncing. It's exporting a group of audio tracks, a group of track as a one audio track. And we could, for example, have a very basic approach would be like exporting all the strings tracks, as one track. So strings, brass, woodwinds, percussion, synths, right? And we would have 5 tracks, 5 stems, and they would be ready for mixing afterwards. That will give us quite a lot of flexibility, maybe not the type of flexibility that we want. We would want to have separated the high strings, the low strings, and also the short notes and the long notes, and so for the brass, so for the woodwinds generally. It depends. You will end exporting a number of stems that will make sense to you. So how many stems do we need? Again, it depends. It could be like 20, 30, something like that. I generally export something around 20 to 30 stems. Which stems do I use? do I export? Well, we have to, the important thing here is we are applying reverbs when we are mixing. So when it comes to reverbs, we've discussed that long notes, like long harmonics or long just long melodies, will accept more reverb than short notes generally. Okay, and also higher range will accept more reverb than the lower range. Okay, and that's a concept that we will discuss further when it comes to a reverb, but that will help a lot keeping the clarity, especially in the mid-low end. Okay, now when we export groups of tracks, we're going to make sure that then when we are applying reverb to groups of tracks, and when we apply reverb to stems, we don't want to have like the long notes and the short notes mixed in one stem, or the high range strings and the lower strings in one stem, if possible. So what stems do I bounce? Well, I bounce the, and that's my approach, and it's evolved over the years. You can use this as a reference and then export your own stems. But when it comes to exporting stems, I usually will have the high short strings. For the strings, I will have the shorts and longs, and high and lows. Okay, so I'll have short high strings, short low strings, long high strings, and low long strings. That's for the strings. For the brass, it depends on how extensive the orchestration is in that specific cue. Usually I'll have short brass and long brass. You could have the four stems with the high, short, high, long, etc. But that's, I found that most of the times I don't need that much separation. It's because of the type of libraries that I use. It's like it does not require for me to add a lot of reverb to the brass. They come with just enough room reverb, and if I need a specific, for example, if I've got like a solo horn melody or a trumpet section melody that when I'm composing, I know that it'll require reverb, then I may export that track separate, like totally independent from any other stem. Okay, but that's when we are exporting for mixing. We have to think, when we are composing, basically we have to think in a logical way, so then when we go to mix, we've got enough flexibility. And we, as when we are composing, there's no one who knows better than us what will be the requirements afterward when we are mixing, what we will need. Okay, so the strings will have 4 stems, the brass will have 2 stems, and so the woodwinds will have 2 stems. They generally have short woodwinds and long woodwinds. Then when it comes to percussion, I generally will have the high percussion, mid percussion, and low percussion. Okay, then I may have like rolls, like cymbal rolls, and I may separate those, and also the timpani. Sometimes I may separate those. If not, I will keep those for the cymbal rolls. I will, it'll be in the high range percussion, and the timpani rolls will, be in the low percussion. Then I've got, for the percussion, I usually have another one which is like a super low type of percussion, like bombers or really low sounding percussion. Then I've got 2 extra stems just in case. When it comes to basses, I have 2 basses, which is like auxiliary 1 and auxiliary 2, and they're just there in case I've got some type of like a duduk or something that doesn't fit any of those above. And then I will have for the synths, I will have something similar to the strings. I will have the short high, short low, and the long high, long low. Okay, so that makes a total of 20 to 30 stems, and some of them I may have I may export, for the double bass. I want to export just the double bass because it's doing something very specific, and I want to have control over the double bass section. Who knows? Okay, so that's it. How to export them? Well, it depends on the sequencer, but most of the sequencers, you will set up all your buses, and then you'll be able to select export buses. That's it. And so that's the faster, the easier way. Now it requires a little bit of setup first, right? It'll require you to have all those buses, and most importantly, having all the tracks routed to every bus. And if you forget any track, it goes, you know, if you've got one track that goes right to the master track instead of going through the buses to the master track, then when you're exporting the buses, well, you know, that track won't be in the mix afterwards. So when we are composing, we have to, in every track that we are using, we have to make sure that it goes through the buses before going to the master track. That would be the easier way when it comes to exporting. If you've got all the buses set up, you'll just go export audio, and you can export offline, and in, you know, in a minute or 2 minutes you'll have all the stems there. Now, if you don't have it, if you're using buses, then what you can do, and it depends on sequencers, but you can select. You've got your sequence, your cue there. You've done composing, and then you can select the MIDI regions that you want to export. In Sonar, you will select the MIDI regions. In other sequencers, you'll have to mute. And then you'll do different passes. Okay, I'm going to export the strings. Let's export the string. Okay, and I'm going to export the staccato brass, and you'll export the short brass, etc. It just takes more time, but you don't have to set up buses. You don't have to worry about buses. We've got to just be careful about not to forget any track. It's very common to forget. It just at the end of a composition, I'm sure you may be exhausted depending on the track. You may be at the end of the day in the exporting. We can make mistakes. So I recommend using like in a spreadsheet to just write down all the tracks and then the stems. So tracks, stems, and you'll just make ticks to make sure that you exported all the tracks. And depending on the size of your sequence, you'll need that or not. Okay. So this is a mixing project. We will be using this one for discussing the mixing concepts this couple of weeks. So this is how it looks. It's obviously it's finished. You can see some automation. You'll see some plugins loaded, and you will see some tracks sort of chopped. This is not how it looks right when you export the stems. Those are the stems that I exported from the sequencer. There are 18 audio tracks, and then basically what I would do is just bring them here, and it would import the 18 audio tracks. You would name them here, etc. So what I did is just cutting those parts where the tracks weren't playing. It doesn't really make that big of a difference when it comes to samples, because there isn't really background noise. It's more common to see this if you record it an orchestra, because there's noise, not just the mics, but also a musician, chairs, etc. And so it's very common getting rid of them that way. But this, other than the automation that you can see, but this is how the project would look like right before start mixing. Analog saturation. What's analog saturation? And why do we need analog saturation? So every technique that we will apply when we are mixing is so we make our music feel alive. Because when we are composing with samples, we are already making an effort for those samples to sound alive. When we are mixing, we still can make it sound even a little bit more alive. So here the concept of analog saturation is the same. When we are mixing in the box, when we are mixing in our computer, everything's so perfect. It's too perfect in a way. Back in the days when you would be mixing with an analog mixing board, there are plenty of electronic components in there. We are talking about resistors and transistors, etc., that theoretically wouldn't affect the sound, but the truth is that just for the sound going through those mixing boards, the sound, the quality of every track would change in a very subtle way, but it would get that analog type of sound that we are missing these days when we are using just the sequencer for mixing. So there will be some plugins that will emulate, sort of changing that character a little bit, like applying that analog feel to the sound. So we don't really need to know what those plugins do. I mean, they will affect some specific harmonics. Usually they will be very simple. They will come with a knob, and it'll allow you to sort of give it more or less analog flavor. There are some sequencers that already come with those modules built in their channel strips, and there will be other plugins that will specifically create that effect. For example, Sonar will come with this concept of the Pro channel, which will allow you, it comes with, you know, a series of modules, come with a compressor, a cue, etc. And it comes with this console emulation module. You can activate or deactivate, and then you can have, you know, less or more effect, and you know, this is the sort of an input. And this is a concept of tolerance. Tolerance is every channel in a mixing board, it's supposed to be the exact same, you know, it's with the same components, etc. But the truth is that every channel will be a bit different. So if in Sonar you turn this on, then every console emulation will sort of apply. It's sort of the same algorithm, will create the same sound, but if you turn this on, then it'll apply a little bit of a different sound. Again, we are trying to make a music to feel alive, so those small variations will make a difference. It doesn't make a real difference when you are working in just one track, but when you put them all together, it does. So let's grab here this horns line, and let's listen without and then with, and let's see the difference. We will see that it's a very subtle difference, but it's when we are mixing, it's all about those subtle differences that when we put together, then it makes a big difference. So I'll toggle it in and out, and you'll see this yellow thing going off and on. Okay, so we're starting without and in, out and in. It's got like a little bit more of body, and it's a bit of a thicker sound. So those plugins in a way will make an instrument or a section sound louder without us having to raise volume, really. So when I am composing, not mixing, when I'm composing, I have one of those activated in every single track. In Sonar is this console emulator thing in the Pro channel. In Cubase, it's a module in the channel strips called Magneto 2. Which is sort of like a tape emulator type of thing. Okay, then we would have other console emulators, and there are many. This is the NSL. It'll allow us to set up different mixing boards. This is it emulates a NIF. There's another one that emulates an SSL console, etc. And again, same concept here. Basically, this is sort of a drive. It's like more or less analog feel, and this is like the output. You can bring it down because this, again, it'll make it sound like a bit louder. So let's open the one loaded in this track. This is brass. Again, when I am using, I'm gonna turn this off, because when I'm using a plugin, I won't be using this one. So this is the one that I'm using for horn, just because it sounds good for horns. Let's see the difference. Okay. Again, not big difference. What I'll try to do is look for the tone color that I like, right? And then obviously this will sort of make it feel like it sounds louder and louder, and then I will bring down the volume, you know, so it sounds like with the same sound pressure. Let's give this a try. that would be it. So most of the times the built-in console emulation modules in your sequencer will sound good enough. It just for brass, I found NSL to sound very good. Inflator is another one that sounds very good for percussion. So, but at the end of the day, it's just, it's just very subtle. But it is good to give to your mix like an analog flavor. And we will see that most of the plugins that we are using, even if we are just EQing, we will try to use those plugins that are emulating an analog unit. For example, we'll see this afterwards, but when it comes to EQ, I use this API 550A equalizer just because it doesn't just only add the EQ setting, but also it gives that API flavor. When it comes to reverbs, we've got two types of reverbs. We've got algorithmic digital reverbs, or we have convolution reverbs. A convolution reverb will put an instrument in a room. So for example, if you've got like a close sounding violin and you want it to sound like in a bigger room, then you can select, you can make it sound like in a cathedral, for example. Okay, so generally for orchestral instruments we will put them in a room first, and then we will add some extra digital algorithmic reverb if necessary. The thing though is most of these days libraries, they already have been recorded in great rooms, so we don't need to use a convolution reverb on top of that. So sometimes we may add, if necessary, an algorithmic digital reverb. So the first concept that we have to know about reverbs is that we will be inserting a different reverb to every track, and that will ensure separation and it'll help gaining clarity for our mix. Doesn't mean that we have to use different plugin. It can be same plugin with different settings, different presets, but we want to have a different reverb in every channel. Second concept, we want to cut the low frequencies. I generally cut everything below 400 to 500 when it comes to reverbs. If it's an instrument that's playing in a very high register, like violins, harmonics, for example, I may go even higher. So you want to cut the low frequencies in every plugin that you inserted in your tracks. And now it's about applying the concepts that we mentioned before. We want more reverb for the longs and highs and less reverb for the shorts and lows. And when we say more reverb, generally will mean more amount of reverb. So this is no reverb and this is 50% dry, 50% wet. And also it means longer. So when we say, when we've got long notes, like long high notes, like a slow strings melody playing in its high register, then we can add a long reverb. This is a 6 seconds long reverb. It's a very long reverb. Okay, or we can increase when we are using digital reverbs. Generally, we will be able to control the duration of the reverb tail. So let's see a couple of examples. These are the strings long high. So those are long high strings. Let's insert a reverb. This is B2. We can control the amount of reverb. This is completely dry. This is completely wet. And we can control the length. This is 6 seconds, a very long reverb, 2 seconds. And finally, we can control the low cut. So let's give it a listen. So when we stop, we can hear the reverb tail. And even though reverb usually will make things sound nicer, we don't want to have too much reverb. Otherwise, we'll start losing clarity. So the first thing I'll do is I'll hit play and I'll try to find how much reverb do we need. And when mixing, basically when we apply a new thing, we wanna make sure that it adds a little bit, but it's subtle, it's not too much. Unless we are going for a very specific effect where we want it to really sound very wet. In this case, right here, the strings sound didn't lose its character, but still it's a nice reverb. Now let's adjust the length. That'd be obviously too much, too short. That's nice. Finally, let's cut a little bit the lows. We want to make sure that the reverb tail feels natural. Around here, around 3 to 500, this area here, we can still hear the full body of the reverb tail, and we are making sure to cut some of the low frequencies and unwanted low frequencies. We can even have different reverbs for one instrument. For example, this is the piano. This part here, it's more of an orchestral piano, and this part, it's more of like the arrangement itself had a lot of separation and clarity, and I needed to sort of bring some more sound to the mix. So by adding the reverb, I was sort of filling the gaps. Let's just quickly listen to the different sections, and then we'll hear the piano. And then we'll hear the piano isolated. Okay, and this one. Okay, let's isolate the pianos. And this one here. It comes with a long reverb. This is the reverb for this part. It's a 3.5 seconds long reverb. It's a long reverb. And this part here, it's not just shorter, but also it's the amount of reverb went down dramatically. See the other one? So much more reverb. Let's open both. Let's compare. We are using the same preset here, but remember, they are not different instruments playing at the same time. It's actually the same instrument in two different sections. Let's compare real quick. This reverb here. Short tail, just a tiny bit of reverb. It's much longer reverb and quite a lot of reverb. Even though most of the orchestral instruments were already recorded in a good room, sometimes it sounds nice using a convolution reverb on top of those instruments. For example, I added this Berlin Church preset to the short strings. It's a preset that I like a lot, and it works great with short strings. See, it just adds a tiny bit of air on top of him. Without, with, just that tiny bit of air at the end. And without. As you can see, it's a fairly short reverb. Now, depending on the plugin, 2.2 seconds in B2, the plugin that we just saw before, it feels longer. With spaces, it feels shorter. Something to keep in mind. And the same concept with the dry to wet. It's a bit different, even though we may move this one like a 50%. Actually, it's not a 50% because we've got the dry signal at 100%. So, this configuration will feel like something like this, right? Whereas visually, it may seem like we are here. Okay, and now when we go here, like dry 100% and wet 100%, it'll be like 50%. We would have to go dry 0% and wet 100% for it to sound like this. If we added more of wet, then the tail would feel a little bit longer. Right? But here it's just like a tiny, it's just like a little bit of reverb. See, here we are just listening the reverb. Okay. Just a tiny bit. There are short notes. And there are other instruments that won't need reverb. Those are the short, low strings. No need for reverb there. We want clarity in the low end. And if we've got too much reverb down there, we won't be able to hear that area with the cellos and the bassoons, etc. And now everyone. Next week we will see specific reverb settings for the different orchestral families. When it comes to EQ, we've done most of what we needed during the composing process. We cut the low frequencies, we cut as well some of the mid-lows here to avoid muddiness in this area. Sometimes we cut a little bit as well here, but that we did during the composing process. And that's most what we need actually, but sometimes we may want to slightly EQ some stems. So when it comes to EQing orchestral stems, we won't go too crazy. Basically the things that we have to know. First, this is FabFilter Pro Q. When we are mixing and we are EQing in the mixing process, usually we will use analog emulation plugins, just because they bring that analog flavor that a regular digital flat sounding plugin won't. But before we get into that, let's briefly explain the different EQ concepts. Okay, so first, there are some plugins that will come with an analyzer. That means that when we play the track, we can graphically see the frequencies. Okay, those are the strings, for example. Or the piano. Okay, that's cool because that's very helpful most of the times. In this plugin we can see the pre and post. So if we are cutting some frequencies, we can see how we are cutting those, see here? Or if we are cutting the low frequencies here, we can see it. Those are the pre EQ, that's the post EQ. Okay, so when it comes to EQ, we basically need to know about cuts. We can have a low cut or a high cut filter. Okay, we have bells. We can boost or cut some frequencies. And then let's get rid of those. Let's close that, get rid of those. And finally, we've got shelves. Okay, we have high shelves, low shelves, and we can boost or cut frequencies. Okay, with the shelf we will boost or cut a specific range of frequency starting from a specific point, and same here. We get rid of those. With a bell we will just boost or cut a range around the selected frequency. And finally, with the cut, we will cut everything below that frequency or above that frequency if it's a high cut. So when it comes to EQ, the first thing that we need is to find that frequency that we want to boost or cut. Okay, so the way we do that is we will bring up a bell, we'll bring up the Q, and then find that frequency. Once we find that frequency, we will bring the Q down and we either boost it a little bit or cut it a little bit. Okay, this is not electronic music, this is orchestral music, and when it comes to orchestral music we just want to do very subtle things. And just to briefly explain the different controls, this is a bell, for example. We have this frequency, it will allow us to select the frequency, the gain, which will allow us to cut or boost, and then the Q, which will allow us to select a more broad or narrow range of frequencies. And that is similar in a shelf as well. This is the Q, the lower, the softer the curve. We got gain for cutting or boosting, and then there's the frequency that let's just get rid of this, that we want to select. Okay, so same thing for a low shelf. When it comes to a cut, we don't have gain, we do have frequency, we've got Q as well, and we've got this new thing which is the dBs per octave. The higher the number, the bigger the cut. Okay, and finally this Pro Q comes with this little tool here, which is very helpful when it comes to finding a specific frequency that we want to boost or cut. So the way that we would usually do it is, as we said, we would bring up that frequency, up the Q, and then we would play the track and we would try to find the frequency that we want to cut or boost. Maybe around here we could cut a little bit depending on what we wanted, right? Now with the little headphone thing, it allows us to just isolate that frequency, just that range. You would hear just that range around that frequency. And maybe it's easier for us to find the frequency that we want to cut. Okay, so let's just quickly EQ the long high strings. Okay, same plugin, same settings, but now it's in the strings. I just moved it in the other window. So let's hear the strings. Let's try to cue the string. Let's give it a listen first. Let's come here. Okay, in context. Okay, I feel that they could have a little bit of something around here. It would bring some more brightness and presence, and there's something around here that we could cut a little bit. It would make it feel a little bit more natural. Let's see if we can find those. Let's start with this one, okay? And when it comes to cueing, if you just solo the track, it'll be easier, but then we will try to do it in context as well. Get rid of this. I see something around 10, sounds beautiful. Let's just isolate it for a second. Yeah, sounds beautiful here. If you could boost that a little bit, just a tiny bit, let's bring the Q down and let's just move this 1 to 2 dB, something like that. With Pro Q, you can select different. See, this is a 3 dB scale type of thing. It's the same. It's we are not changing the amount of dBs that we are, but it's easier to work when we are working with orchestral, where we are just boosting like 1 to 3 dBs. It's easier to not making mistakes with a lower scale. Let's find out the other frequency that's sort of bothering a little bit. Let's bring the scale down so I can boost a little bit more. 1.7, something like that. That's yeah, something like that. Let's just cut this a little bit, bring down the Q. Yeah. Let's try with without. Before, after, before. Yeah, it's subtle, but it does make a difference. Now, it's easy with this plugin, but when it comes to mixing, we want to bring those analog emulation plugins, and that's what we are doing. So we'll bypass this one, and we will try to replicate the same with this plugin. Now it's easy because we know what the Q we are after. If we didn't know, we would do the same thing. We would bring up the gain. We don't have control over the Q, and then we would select the frequency that we want to cut or bust. So that's what we would do. Now, if you are not very familiar with the API plugin or other analog emulation type of EQ plugins, and if it feels easier to use a more visual plugin like the Pro Q, go ahead and do so, and then just replicate the same EQ here. So it would be 2 at around K, 2 dBs bust around 10K, and then minus 2 dBs at around 1.5. It was 1.7, but the closest is 1.5 because the next is 3. We would bypass fab filter and activate API 550A, and let's see, actually let's bypass and let's see the difference. This one is a little bit more subtle, but it totally works. Let's just go a bit more drastic just to easier hear the difference. So bypassed. Okay, let's bring it down. Again, next week we will see what settings to use in specific orchestral families, but the biggest advice here would be use your ear. We will see some specific numbers, but those are not like magic numbers that will always work with all the strings. Those are frequencies that may work. They worked for me for that specific library or combination of libraries, and they for sure will be a good starting point, sort of a fast track that will get you started. But ultimately we will need to use our ear because every mixing situation is going to be different. Okay, so compressing. Basically compressing a signal is reducing the volume of the louder sounds or amplifying the quiet sounds. Basically what we are doing is narrowing or compressing in a way the dynamic range. So let's bring a compression plugin here. Let's grab this percussion track, and basically The two most important elements in a compressor are the threshold and the radio. Okay, and then we've got the attack and release. We'll talk about those in a second. Let's make this look a bit simpler. So when we hit play, we will see the audio signal coming in, and we will move the threshold, which is this line here. Okay, as soon as the threshold, as soon as the signal hits the threshold, we will see some compression being applied. And compression basically means bringing down the volume for that transient. Like really quick, it'll bring down the volume and then it'll go up again. That's what a compressor does. And the question is, okay, how much is it bringing down the volume? Well, this is the ratio. So if we choose a ratio of 2 to 1, right, 2 to 1, for every 2 dBs that the signal goes above the threshold, the compressor will bring down 1. And we can go with higher ratios, and when we get to 10 to 1, it's considered a limiter, but we could go even higher. Usually when it comes to orchestral music, we will go with lower ratios, like something to 1.8 to 3. 3 would be high. So let's give this a try. We will see the signal coming in here and here, and we will see that as it hits the threshold, some compression will start applying. You can see this here, or here we will see the signal coming in here. Let's give this a try. So we can see the signal coming in. Let's bring down the threshold. As the signal goes above, you can see how some compression is kicking in. Now more compression. Okay, and the louder the sound, the more compression is being applied. Okay, as we can see, let's just see this again. So you can see the curve is subtle, it's slow here. So this is the release time here. So the attack and the release time will control how fast the compression kicks in and then goes out. Okay, so a fast attack and a fast release will make the compression much responsive. Let's see this. See the curve? It's not as smooth as before. Okay. And finally, we can increase the ratio and we will have more compression. Depending on the nature of the instrument, we could use, again, when it comes to orchestral music, we don't want to compress more than 2 to 3, 4 dBs. So this 0, 10, 20. We can see it's compressed 7.8 dBs. We don't want to go that much. So the way we would do this is bring down the ratio to 2.1. For percussion, we will want fast attack and release, and then we will bring down the threshold up until the compressor starts kicking in. That's it, 1.9, something like that. Then we could decrease the ratio a little bit if we wanted. And that's it. Now, since we are reducing the volume, we could compensate bringing up the output a little bit. So if it's gone minus 1.7 dBs, we would bring it up 1.7 or 2 dBs, something like that. So what we get is the same volume, but with a more compressed signal. And that makes the instrument sound more in your face, more like up front. Okay, so if we were to compare, what we will hear is a very similar sound, same volume, but some more presence. It's very subtle, but that's the style when it comes to orchestral music. Subtle touch. Now, depending on the nature of the instrument, sometimes if the instrument covers a higher range, we may want to use a multiband compressor. A multiband compressor, it's like having 6 compressors in one or 4 compressors in one, and it'll be compressing different areas, different frequency ranges. We will see as I hit play how this will be compressing different areas. We can see that's compressing a little bit more here in the low end and a little bit less in the mid-high end. And so those are the thresholds. So we've got the same controls here, threshold ratio, etc., but it's just several times. When it comes to orchestral music, we will be compressing percussion and we'll compress the synths as well, especially the percussive ones, but we should avoid compressing synth pads. Now we've talked about plugins, we've talked about reverb, EQ, compression. EQ and compression will make a difference, but not as big of a difference as the reverb, which is a very important element in our mix. But if there is something that will make a much bigger difference than anything else, will be automation. We said that our purpose when we are mixing is making our music feel alive, right? And when we were composing, we were using expression and modulation and vibrato to make our samples feel alive. Now we can add even more when we are mixing. So there are 3 types of automations that we can apply, okay? The first one is for dynamics and fluctuation. The second one is for organizing, and it's more about micro automation. And the third one is other type of automations where we will be automating not just volume, but also maybe panning, compression, or reverbs. So let's first talk about the automation that we will use for dynamics and fluctuation. This one applies mostly to long notes type of tracks. So for example, this will apply to the long high strings. Let's make this bigger. And let's look at this part here. So what we see here is that volume is going up and down. Let's look at the fader here and see how it's moving. And you can see how it's moving 1 dB up and down. And it doesn't make that big of a difference. We can't sometimes even notice, but it is there. And when we apply that to every long notes type of track, it makes the music flow so much more natural. So the way we would record this is, in the track, we would activate the right button, and then we would grab the fader here, we would hit play, and we would record. Okay, as you can see, Sonar just reduces the amount of dots even though they're there. Okay, so that's how you would do it. Let's go back to the original one and let's listen to this one. As opposed of which in a way feels more static. If you've got one of these, this is a DAW controller, you can record the automation right from your fader. The DAW controllers usually come motorized, so anything that you record here will get recorded here, but then it'll play it back and you'll see the fader moving, which is useful. So if you want to, for example, change something here, you can grab the fader when it's coming down and just grab the fader and move it there. Okay, let's give this a try. Let's activate the right button. So this is this track. So that's how you record fluctuation, and that makes the music flow so much better. Now, for the long notes, we can also do something else with automation, which is giving extra dynamics. For example, when the strings come in, we could make sure that they start more from niente and then go a bit louder in volume, so we have those extra dynamics. For example, in this part here, let's listen just the strings. Or let's put this in context, and then let's listen just the strings. So it's this fader here. So before that it was like which is good, but when we are mixing we can just go even farther and apply more dynamics. I'm gonna write a lot of dynamic just so you see the effect. Again, usually you don't want to overdo it, but here we go. Okay, and that in context would go like. Obviously we are changing what we intended when we recorded this. That's what we don't want to go that extreme, but just so you see the effect that you can, you just can increase a little bit the dynamics. That's a type 1 of automation, okay? For long notes, which is fluctuation, what we saw recording a little bit of fluctuation when we don't need to enhance dynamics, and then enhancing those dynamics when we need to. So that's type 1. Type 2 is about organization, and it's more of like micro automation, and that will sort of help our counterpoint, right? Or separating layers or presenting them in a more clear way, and will help us gaining separation. Not all the instruments are being featured all the time and at the same time. And even at the same moment, if we've got, for example, like a horns melody and some high string staccatos, we've got that area, right, which is, horns and violins are left. So if we've got the horns melody here and we've got the strings staccatos here as well, there will be some conflicting. And even though in our arrangement, when we were orchestrating, we could make sure that the horn wasn't arranged and the strings were in a higher range to ensure separation. Well, with the mix we can still help that a little bit more. Let's see one example, and the idea here would be just to automate those parts where we want, for example, the beginning of the horns melody to stand out, and then at the sort of middle of the phrase where that longer note goes down, we may want to bring down the volume and then bring up the volume of the strings so we can hear the strings, and we're basically are bringing more information to the listener and that keeps him interested. Let's see one example. Okay, so we've got that concept that we described. Let's find the horn. Let's make this smaller. Let's find the shorter strings and the horns melody. And here we go. Let's see the automation and the automation. So basically, we've got the horns. We didn't have a lot of automation here, but for the strings, we do have automation, and those are these fader here, number 6. Okay, so let's see this part here. So you can see how the beginning of every note, horns note, starts here, pom, and then the strings pop, 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 and then the horns, pim, strings, horns, strings. Let's see that. Makes a big difference. Let's hear without it. So I'll deactivate read. So even though we see the curve, it won't read it. And now with. So the strings are there, but we can still hear clearly the horns melody. Again, we've got to use our ear here, because at this point we didn't automate this part. And the reason is, we could already hear it, we don't need more. And this part, somehow, even though it's playing in octaves, we couldn't hear it that much, we automated this part, and down, and up, and down, okay? For this type of automation, I would use pencil tool. Since we are sort of micro automating, sometimes it's hard to nail it. Doing it ourselves live, and it's easier to, or at least it's easier to fine-tune things like this with the pencil tool, where you can just grab sort of one note. Finally, now that we know how to use automation, where else could we be using automation? Well, we can use automation everywhere. We could automate the threshold of a compressor plugin, so it compresses both in the louder parts, but also bringing down the threshold, so it also compresses the softer parts. We could also automate left and right. If we've got, for example, brass. If we've got brass, for example, let's activate right. And we knew, for example, that here it's we've got the strings, we've got the high strings coming in, violins in the left side. Maybe we're gonna bring this down. I made this too much, just so that we can clearly hear it, but we would never do it that drastic of a cut here. But we could automate just one side. If we are automating volume, we are affecting to the whole thing. But if we are just automating, like let's say, for example, horns sound usually more to the left side. If we are automating, if we are bringing down like a 2 or 3 dBs down the right side of it, basically what we are bringing down are the reflections or the reverb, the room reverb of the horns section. And that doesn't affect the overall horn sound that much as if we were automating the whole thing. Okay, this one doesn't make that much sense, but just to give you an idea that we could also automate left and right. Another one that makes much more sense is automating reverb. It's very common at the end of a cue, automating a very long reverb. That's what we've got here. This is the master track, which with a send to a reverb which is inserted in a bass. Okay, it's a very long reverb, and you can see here how when it comes at this point, this send will be grabbing the master and sending some to this reverb inserted in a bass. Okay, so it creates that. Let's just stop at this point here. And you've got this long, nice reverb which we couldn't use, and it's we are applying this to the whole track, not just to the strings or anything like that. It's to the master track, so we couldn't have that depth, that length of a reverb all the time when we are applying it to this section change. We can apply that at the end. Okay, let's stop there. Long, nice reverb, which helps connecting sections. So these are just some ideas, the most effective ones, maybe, but you can be as creative as you want when it comes to automation. Let's make this small and let's bring the mixer here and let's take a listen to the whole track and we can see how the automation goes up and down. This is a classic example of one of those tracks where we'll say, oh, I've been trying to mix this and it doesn't sound good. I've applied all the techniques that I've learned during the course, let's say, and it still doesn't sound good. Where actually the problem is not the mixing, but rather the composing, the arranging, the syncastration, the orchestration part of it. So let's take a look of this example, and we will find many things that we could have done better during the composing part. And we will talk about volume, balance, panning, the arranging itself, and we'll discuss those things and how those are gonna make very hard for you to get mixed afterwards. And no matter what we do when we are mixing, we're gonna make it sound more realistic or more epic or anything. Okay, so let's go step by step. Okay, and I'm not. We aren't commenting here on the very small details that we could change. We're just gonna comment on the stuff that, you know, in the first time we listen to it,
we can tell, oh, okay, we've got to fix this, we got to fix that. We don't have, let's say, we don't have trombones here, or is this big part, this big epic section. So let's take a listen to the whole thing once, and then let's comment section by section. Okay, so there we go. Okay, let's comment first some overall. Let's go with some overall comments first, and then let's go section by section. Okay, so the boom effect here, I think is this one here. Boom boom, where it is here. The boom effect here. It doesn't really need to have the high frequency information. We could cut that because we've got another percussion actually doing that. So let's. It's a boom. I would, when using a boom like a thing, I always select something that you know, when I'm providing this depth, this deep type of heat, then I select something that's just, but it doesn't have this high frequency information. It doesn't need it because we've got it in the timpani. So something like this one that you've got here, gravity effects, is gonna work better. Something like that. This one has got a kick, a lot of punch, but when we just want this deep hit, we don't need that. Okay. Also, comments, overall comments for the strings. And if I'm stopping here, it's because I wrote down all the notes, and I just don't want to forget anything here. So for the strings, the biggest thing for the strings here is this happens all the time, especially at the beginning, but it's so important. Drops between connecting notes. We can have, let's go to bar 28, for example. 27, 28, something like that here, and let's take a listen just to the strings. Oh, by the way, if I was provided with the stems, and every stem started here and ended around here. I cut it everything that was silent in between. So when I'm here, I can see just the tracks that actually have data. So I can come to this viola solo section, and I'll see what's the real orchestration. I'll come here to this bigger part, and I'll see what's the orchestration here, showing just the tracks that actually have data in. Okay, that's why I cut the tracks, but actually it's just full stems. Okay, so for the string, let's come here to bar 28, and let's just see the strings. Let's solo the strings, and we cannot have that type of thing. We want the strings. That's how it would sound if a real strings orchestra would be playing that part there, and that's what we want in our we want our samples doing the same thing. Otherwise, it's not gonna sound realistic, and it's just gonna take us out of the cue or the mix. We're gonna go like, why this is not sounding right to me? Well, small things like that one. And now we are going to mix, and we will mix it, and it doesn't sound good. Well, that's something that not EQ won't fix, or compression won't fix, not even reverb will fix. Okay, so that's something that we have to take care of when we are composing. Tightness. Let's take a look here at, there are some sections that they just come in late. Let's go to bar 16 here real quick. 16. And let's see who we've got here. So we've got the cellos, the cellos and violins coming in. It's this part here. Okay, so let's take a look at the whole thing, and and this part here is coming in late. Let's take a listen again. A little bit more context. And it stays late all the time. And actually, if we look here, the heat comes here. Pa 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 pum. And we can see how it's late all the time. And so that's not cool. And we could fix that afterwards. We could fix it here, and make it sing. But that's something we have to do when we are composing. As opposed to what we had before. And after. And you see we also the strings actually, instead of me having them starting here, I made them start here, which that's something we have to do when we are composing, adding that negative delay. So the strings, the cello or the violins or the viola attack, which is slower than the timpani attack, you can see they are much faster. It's got time. It syncs with percussion. Okay, we'll keep this where it was. Okay, let's make this smaller. Oops. And let's keep moving. Okay, more stuff. Consistency. Let's go to bar 20. And let's show what we've got here. Okay. So, let's go to the consistency cello. So the lowest strings, where are the lowest strings? Here, mids and lows. Okay, we cannot have the cello disappear. Well, this track here has the double basses and cellos. But here, the cello in 20 and 21 disappeared. Well, why? Is that because the cello can't go below a C note? We've got the D, B, B flat, I think it is. But we cannot have this track here with double basses and cellos, and just because maybe we copied the double bass to the cello and brought up an octave, but still when the cello goes below, whatever the reason is why we don't hear the cello, it's not right, because it's in a small thing, but it's gonna make our track not to sound solid throughout the different sections. It's happening here. All of a sudden we are losing body and fullness. It doesn't sound as full and big and consistent. Okay. So same thing, the drop between notes, it happens for the strings, it happens in every section. It's very noticeable in the violins, but it's also noticeable for the bass strings here in bar 12, 13. Right here. Instead of them, which is what we want. Okay, super important. Otherwise, it's gonna make the string sound fake. And consistent penning consistency as well. Let's go to bar 24 and let's pay attention how here in the highest strings, all of a sudden we've got them sounding to the right, and then all of a sudden we've got an E flat note. I think it is sounding to the left. Sorry. We've got the high string sounding to the left, and all of a sudden we've got the B flat note, high violin sounding to the right. Right there. F. That B flat note going there, and that's very noticeable, and that actually we can hear it with full orchestra when we've got everyone playing. Again, let's around here we can hear the E flat, and then the high strings go back to left. Solo. Okay, those things. Now, let's go section by section. So section A. Section A, and let's see what we've got here. Okay, and let's hear the whole track. So, let's take a listen to this section here. Okay, So this section, when we are composing, we need to have dynamic coherence. In a way, if we are starting, this is the beginning of this track, we are starting soft. It's this soft, big, deep type of texture. We cannot have softer strings and fortissimo timpani. Well, we can, but it's just not going to sound compensated. If that's the effect that we want, it's okay. But it just think of a real orchestra. We will have softer strings, and then the timpani was playing super forte there. It's gonna sound like that, but actually the timpani here sounds louder. You can see that it sounds louder than this section here, which is a louder section. It's softer here than here. And actually, this is an introduction, sort of softer section. We'll be building up until we reach this point here. And we've got a timpani softer in the big epic section than the soft section. So coherence, we want to make sure that if we are in a soft section, we want to have the rest of the instruments playing soft. Now, if you want more percussion presence, then what we will need is for the percussion to be orchestrated, a little bit more orchestrated. If we want if we are playing soft timpani, and because we are playing soft, we don't have that much high frequencies, because the louder you play the timpani, the more bigger the frequency spectrum, and the more high frequencies we'll have. If we want a little bit more of that, well, we can add something else there. We can add a soft snare, or a soft tom, or a soft bamboo sticks. We can add something to add for this timpani part. Or you've got this percussion here as well. Well, that's something. Okay. But if we want more definition for this part, if we want to keep it softer, because it's going to make more sense with this section, and we want to add a little bit of definition to this, then we just add boom, 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 with some sort of higher sort of percussion ta 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 thing. Okay, and that adds definition, but it still keeps the we will be able to keep the volume down, the loudness, instead of fortissimo we could play mezzo piano or mezzo forte or piano or something like that. Okay, more. Let's keep going here. So for the strings, I would have more dynamics in this section. They're very, very static. They do have dynamics, but still they sound too static. Let's take a look, for example, at some like here. So strings. Let's make sure that we've got all the strings here, and strings. Just some more dynamic, especially for the long notes. Towards the end they go down, but we want to have more dynamics. Again, that's something that we can no EQ, reverb, or even automation. We can automate volume here, but we want real dynamics. We want modulation, CC1, doing the proper crossfading there. Okay, the first repetition. Let's go to here the first repetition of this A section. Okay. We've actually mentioned everything here. For the highest strings, the drops, big time. We want to make sure that that's great. This one here, but then for this part, tora, that's the tora. Instead of tora, we want to make, especially when the melody goes up, we want to build. When the melody goes down, we want most of the times we will add dynamics. But if it's going up, we cannot have a drop there, because it's gonna kill the momentum. It's gonna kill that build that we are creating. Okay. So that's for the highest strings. For the lowest strings, we commented that cello going away, and here here's another thing with the timpani. We basically, what we've got for percussion here is this percussion 2 stem and the timpani. And for the timpani, we've got some softer hits, boom, 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 and then louder ones, boom, 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 boom. Well, it's a big dynamic change, as we can see. It's big. It's a big dynamic, and that's something that we can control a tiny bit with compression afterwards. But we wanna either make this, these big dynamic changes smoother when we are composing, and not go that that piano and that forte all the sudden. Or if we really want to do that, then for the loudest part, it's not about composing and orchestrating and syncostrating. It's not about, I've got one instrument, now it plays piano, it plays fortissimo. It's about, for the louder parts, we have to support those with more instrumentation. It's like we have to plan also when we go to a climatic point. It's not like all of a sudden we go there by adding loud instruments. Now, when we want to reach a climatic point, we have to plan ahead, right? And we have to build the orchestration. We have to plan the orchestration and syncastration. So we've got a bigger arrangement with more instruments supporting that louder part and more forte part. Well, here's the same concept. If we've got more forte parts, we want to support them with something else. This part here, for example, it's great when it comes this third repetition, because we are supporting this with this low hit, which comes to give sort of an entrance to the third repetition, and it sounds great. Let's actually. It sounds great. This adding to the whole thing. So that's really cool. So the same thing, not as as big as this one, but for supporting the louder parts. Otherwise, just a timpani that sounds softer, louder, where everything else, it sounds at the same dynamic. Strings and everything else that's playing here sounds, it's got the same dynamics. Okay. And that again, it's not a mixing thing. It's a composing concept. It's what we have to take care of while we are composing, the arranging, orchestrating part of it. Okay. More. So we've got the lower strings commented. Yes, let's go to the second repetition. Okay, yeah, second repetition. And let's have here. Okay, so this is the cello. We've got cello and violins, I think it is. So no, not big deal. The cello is quite high in its register. That register is nice for like lyric melodies. For high staccato, it's okay. It's got that type of staccato with a lot of character, but it loses body and thickness, which is okay. But well, just be aware of that, and then we will comment on another thing in this staccato. And another thing is that because we've got the cello here, but we also have it here, we have two cello sections playing at the same time. It is okay, but we have to be aware of that. Okay. Second thing, we need more support here for the staccatos. either we give the staccatos more support, or we bring them down in volume. Otherwise, they stand out too much and they sound thick. So, in other words, we've got this section here. And all of a sudden, we've got a sort of mid-high strings coming in. You've got the cellos, which is a sort of low, but it playing in the high registers. So mid-high strings coming in. And so, let me check if this is still recording. Okay, yes. So we've got this section, and all of a sudden we've got these mid-high strings staccatos coming in, and they stand out. They do stand out because they play loud, and we just have them. We don't have any support. A little bit out of balance. So we either give them some support, which that's the option that I would choose, and I would have some. We could have the cellos, instead of we could have them playing DBC and doubling down an octave to provide with some support, or bringing just the cello notes down an octave to add a little bit, but just adding some lower staccatos for them to support these higher staccatos. So it's gonna be either that, or bringing down, I don't know, 2-3 dBs, just a tiny bit, the whole string staccato thing, just a tiny bit. Otherwise, it's a small element that stands out too much. In a real orchestra, that wouldn't be the way it would sound, because we've got the full string section, and then we've got like a second strings section. We've got like the string section, the sustained string section playing here, and then a second set of violins 1 or violins 2 and cellos. That's doubling. That's another string section on top of this one. So there's a lot of people playing here, and just it's a fewer amount of musicians playing here, and still this one stands out too much. In a real orchestra, this would sound a little bit softer. So again, either we bring it down, or we give more support for providing the support that it needs. Okay. Third repetition. Let's go here. What we've got here. So this part is nice. Again, maybe having some more low staccatos mentioned before, but other than that, well, it's very strings driven, which is, it's okay, but it just works fine. It's a nice part. Bridge. Let's go to the bridge here. Let's see what we've got. Cool. Let's take a listen. Okay, so we've got a big strings section here. Again, drops in the connecting notes. We wanna get rid of those. We cannot have that. There's nothing that sounds more fake than having the strings. We wanna connect them, and it's very simple. When we are composing, we wanna overlap them a little bit. We've mentioned that in other videos, but just overlap the end of one note with the beginning of the next one, starting the next one a little bit earlier than it should, so that slow attack doesn't create that drop. It's just as simple as that. Making sure that when we are recording, we overlap that end of the note with the beginning of the next one. Okay. So that's one thing, and maybe I would bring up the double basses just a tiny, not a tiny bit, quite a bit actually. Maybe the cello as well, but the double basses for sure. This section here, we want to provide a little bit of a bigger, deeper. We can hear the cello, but I wish we could hear a little bit more of more double bass for extra deepness. And when I mention deep, like low deep, no depth, not like depth, like the 3 space is the depth. farther away, but rather like low, deep low. Okay. For here, then we've got the voice. Way too loud. I would bring it down quite a bit. And then what this sounds beautiful up until we get this big overlap at around here. We've used a phrase, right? It's we just press one key and it'll trigger the whole phrase. And here we triggered the second phrase. So first phrase. And right here is the connection between the first and the second phrase, and we can hear the overlap, which makes it not to sound realistic because it's a solo voice. There's no way that it's going to have an overlap at any moment. So we have to take a list, review that part. Okay, we want to make sure that it's a solo voice and we don't hear any edit there. Okay, so viola solo coming in here. So consistency first, most important thing. We want to make sure that it's a solo. It can definitely have big dynamics, but we can have it playing louder, and then all of a sudden we've got a softer note. That E note at 41. Which sort of, it helps for the violins to stand out, but it's a viola solo. We want the viola solo to have volume consistency. Okay, so strings, we've mentioned it before, same thing that before. The drops, more dynamics, bring up the lows. We want, let's take a listen of what we've said, but again, get rid of the drops between the connecting notes, more dynamics, bringing up the lows. Let's take a listen at this. Okay, and we want for these strings, we want the sustained strings to provide the background support. We want something that sounds natural, realistic. If we've got those elements that that catch our attention, like the drop between notes, and if we got that, they just takes us out of the mix, and it's something that we want to avoid and that we cannot fix afterwards during the mixing. Okay, B section coming in here. Let's take a listen to it. Let's actually first see what we've got. Okay, good. Let's come here just in case. Good. Okay, let's take a listen to this part. Oops, here. What's going on here? Okay. Okay, so here. This part is very nice. I like it. Just one word of attention in the strings, in this stem that you sent me by mistake with the strings mid-register repetition, that you sent me with reverb, and I asked you to send me the dry stem. This one you sent it me twice. I took a listen to this stem that you added reverb, and there is a ton of reverb. I'm talking about this stem here. This is the one without reverb, and this is the one with reverb that you sent, that you said that you added a little bit of spaces reverb. it's got a lot of reverb. And here's the thing, we can hear the reverb in the left, so the cellos will sound sort of in the right side, but we've got the reverb, wide reverb, also sounding both right and left. Taking so much space, and that's something that we don't want, especially in this section where we've got, because of the way you design this arrangement, we have two strings sections here. So we will need extra separation and extra separation, and we will need to create this space of the sustained string sounding maybe farther away, and the staccato strings sounding a little bit more closer, to gain definition and create separation. That's something that we have to take care in this piece, because this one we've got sort of two strings orchestra playing at the same time, with the sustained strings and the staccato strings. Okay. So, and then we've got the solo, the horns coming in, which sounds very nice. Again, which sound very nice, but there's always a but. Then we've got them coming afterwards here, right? Where are them? Where are they? Here. Okay, yeah, exactly. So, okay, so we've got them sounding here sort of in terms of panning, mid left, and then when they come back again, they sound. Let's take a listen to them. That's something that we will mention afterwards. But what you've got here, you decided to go with. Let me real quick. 1 second here. Where are them? Did I? Okay. Yes, here. Exactly. This one. Sorry. Okay, here. Those sound much more to the left. And it's, it's okay, but generally we want to keep it consistent. If those here sound more to the center, we want those to sound in the same place. So I like having the horn sort of left, but towards the middle. So something in between this one and this one. This one sounds almost center, but a little bit to the left, a little bit. I like having them a little bit more to the left, not as much as this one. Okay, so that's another thing that we have to take care of when we are composing, to have the instruments, always playing in the same spot. We could fix this afterwards mixing with that. In this case, we could fix this afterwards, but it's just more work, and it's so easy when we are composing, and it takes a little bit more effort when we are doing. So it's so easy when we are composing. Sorry, and it takes a little bit more of effort when we are mixing actually. So nice horse melody, panning. Okay, I was wondering in this section, why do we have that many in general actually let me just open the strings. Okay, the percussion here. Why do we have that many percussion stems? When I prefer when a stem is, we could have this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one in this, and also this one, because they aren't playing at the same time. We could have it in one stem. They are similar hits actually. It's just a small note, but yeah. So let's go here to this next section. Viola solo coming in here, very nice. This one sounds very nice. A little bit too loud though, coming in here. This part sounds beautiful. Very well connected notes. Very nice. Consistent throughout. And also you've got overall dynamics, like phrase dynamic, not just notes dynamics, but also phrase dynamics, starting, softer and going, sort of climaxing here and then going back down. Very nice. Maybe a little bit too loud. I would bring it down. Okay. So let's come here at the coming back of the section B. Let's take a listen to this part. Actually, let's make this smaller, and let's take a listen to this part. Okay, so things here. The effect is coming in a little bit late. Let's take a listen here. The downbeat is here, pom pom here, and we still have a little bit of effect. We can, if we don't look at the waveform, if we listen to it, we could move it manually, but too much. So that's one thing. The strings, what we've mentioned, for the sustained strings, what we've mentioned before, a little bit more dynamics, bring up the double bass. We still have drops here and there. And in this case, I would bring down also, I would bring down the violins. So I will bring up the double bass, bring down the violins there. At around here. That E note, it's gotta be the library that you're using. That E note, it goes to the right side. We can hear it again. I didn't catch it before, but the louder it goes, the more it goes to the right side. It's around here. Okay, it's gotta be the library. So let's keep going. And the timpani, what we've mentioned before. For timpani, this louder hit, let's orchestrate those louder parts. We can, orchestration, syncastration, it's about creating dynamics with orchestration. Real dynamics are the ones that are supported by a proper orchestration. That is arranging, just not grabbing one instrument and then louder hits. It's cool to have louder hits, but hey, let's support that with more stuff and let's make this interesting actually. Okay, so second repetition. It sounds nice. Let's actually see what we've got here. It's the same comments than before, especially for the sustain strings. Let's go to the third repetition. And let's bring what we've got here. Okay. So the thing that takes me so much out of the mix here is that or is the super sudden, louder than anything else horns that come in. So we've got this section, and all of a sudden we've got these horns coming in super loud. Horns and trombones. I mean, no preparation here, not support. It'd be nice to have like a cymbal roll or something preparing before they come in, and when they come in, having an orchestra, like the orchestra playing the background behind that supports. Because we've got the horns coming in here and trombones, but the strings whatsoever, same dynamic. They're playing like if nothing would have happened. They're just doing the same thing. So you've got super soft double basses that are doing the same thing that they've been doing throughout the piece. They are actually playing softer at the beginning, and all of a sudden we've got the trombones coming in. So whenever we have something that we want it to sound bigger, and we bring those, okay, we've got the brass coming in, great, okay, we've got the brass coming in, but who else is supporting that, trombones and horns melody? We don't have any brass support really, we don't have any string support. We have the strings there, but they're playing like super soft. So again, we want it to sound coherent there, okay? Fourth repetition. Let's go to the fourth repetition. Let's take a listen to this part. Okay, let's talk about arrangement and composition, and a little bit of counterpoint here. We cannot have everyone playing roots. Let's go at 78, and let's take a listen to what's going on here. We've got the... Okay, so we've got F, D, A, E. Okay. And then if we put the higher strings, same thing. We've got the third here, which is nice. And if we add the high double strings, so you've got D, so it's not the same thing, but we go, we've got the D, 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 C, and then B, and doing the same thing that the bass is doing. So that's, it's not the same thing, but it's very similar to what the bass is doing. Plus, we've got these high strings also doing almost the same thing. So we can't have everyone going with the bass in octaves. It's too much weight for that root-driven element for the sustained strings. We wanted to arrange these. We want it to sound. We've got the melody coming. We've got the melody, but for the background, we want it to provide the support that it needs. So just the the melody starts here, it builds here, it progresses here, and then it resolves here. We've got the same thing here and there. If we want to sound big, we've got to also provide a interesting harmonic material that actually provides support. And just having parallel movement, sometimes it will help. And there's a lot of parallel movement, but we have to be careful, a little bit careful, just, Okay, let's back to orchestration. Percussion up until here hasn't changed really. We've got the same thing. Let's add the Hans Zimmer percussion that comes in here. Exactly, yeah. The percussion, it's been the timpani. Basically, it's been the timpani. We had more things, but let me open more things here. This is the timpani right here, and we also had a little bit of this percussion, this higher percussion, some of the low hits here and there, some effects, but it's just timpani. Well, we've got, it's the same thing that we've got here. It's another rhythm, but it's the same thing. It's in the and we are here in the third repetition. and we've gone 2.5 minutes with the same percussion instruments sort of thing. We don't have more variation here. It's 2.5 minutes. This piece goes more than 3 minutes. Actually, it goes almost 4 minutes, and we are using the same percussion arrangement sort of thing. It slightly changes the pattern, but it's the same thing. We need more. We need that doesn't add variation. And in the other hand, if we just, so we've got two problems here. Variation, we've been doing the same thing for more than 2 minutes. And the second problem is it's timpani. If we want to sound like this big trailer epic, if we're going for that sound, well, just a timpani won't make it. We will need more stuff. And we have some things here and there, but it's not going to be enough. We've got this guy coming in here. But it is not enough. We need more stuff. I mean, if we actually pay close attention to those epic big trailer tracks, there's so much more going on. You know, if we use a good pair of speakers or a good pair of headphones and we listen carefully, there's so much more going on. And there's just stuff that adds a little detail here and there, and then another one, and then, you know, we can have 20, 25, 30 percussion tracks going on at the same time, or you know, there, but not at the same time, but adding information and variation here and there. Okay, so just a timpani won't make it, and if we're just using the timpani throughout the piece, it's going to sound very repetitive. And so again, that's another thing that mix won't fix. It's something that we have to take care of while we are composing. So another thing, we've got let's make this a little bit smaller, and actually let's come here. Yes, so we've got let me see if so we've got the horns somewhere. Let me find them. Okay, here. So the horns and trombones playing the melody, and then right here, and then the strings will pick up, and so they will stop, and the high strings will pick up the melody. Very common, very effective effect. Now we are going down. There's a big drop in volume, size, and space, meaning we can have horns and trombones and then having the strings picking up, but we need something else, because we've got horns to the left, trombones to the right, and then the strings will pick up the melody just to the left. And so the music all of a sudden is like, okay, we had all that big statement, and now we've got the louder strings, but still, what's, you know, the right side goes down in volume and size. And then all of a sudden the music is like, okay, what's going on here? You know, what's missing? Okay. And then all of a sudden we've got this break here. That's too long. Too long. One bar will make it. Just one bar is gonna be enough. Okay. B section modulation coming in here. Okay, it's nice. It's very nice, this bar here, but there's always a but. Where's the low support? Let's take a listen at this part here. Let's make this smaller. Cool. Let's take a listen to this part. We've got high strings. Okay. What else? Let's try to find, you know, where is the real low support. Okay, we've got the highest strings, then we've got these mid strings here. Some low information here, mid and lows. Okay. Repetition, horns, More horns, tuba. It's not coming in up until here. Timpani as percussion. And that's it, some effect that will come here to connect that section. Where's the real low support? So we've got this. That's double bass here. That if we compare it's actually sounding softer than in the first part where it was supposed to sound. So this first part that sounds softer. We've got the bass actually sounding louder than in this climatic moment where we need support and presence, and we don't really have a real low support here. So it's a big part, but we don't have support. We've got the low heat coming in and this build here, but then up here we don't have the low support that we need. Okay, let's keep moving here. 1 second, let me read this. Where are we? It's this modulation, repetition. Okay, and then oh yes, one more comment here. Consistency. Again, Hans Zimmer percussion. Sometimes it sounds louder. Sometimes we won't hear the some of the hits. Let's take a listen here. And we don't want to miss some of the hits. Otherwise, it's, you know, for the listeners ear, it's gonna be like, okay, where is the, you know, something is missing. What's going on? Okay, let's move to the second part. Tuba coming in here. Okay, so we've got the tuba coming in here, and it's just one tuba, and it is very, very loud, and we can actually hear the tuba, which is an instrument that it's more like you can feel it coming in, but you don't really hear it. Let's take a listen here. And what happens is that all of a sudden it sounds small. Why? Because if for the listener we've got the full orchestra playing, and all of a sudden we hear if we would hear a tuba coming in and we can feel the tuba, then it makes it sound bigger. But if we've got the tuba so loud that all of a sudden overpowered sounds louder than it should compared to the rest of the orchestra, all of a sudden the orchestra sounds small. Somehow, you know, it's like if we brought down the volume of everyone else and brought up the tuba volume. It's going to sound fake. So the tuba sounds too loud here. Okay. So, and what we would have to do here is, if we want to increase the size, we're going to make it sound bigger, more epic. We have to add more. It's not just about make one instrument sound louder. It's about synchestrating it the right way and adding more to increase size and volume and dynamics. Okay, more comments. We cannot have the horns loud because it's power attention recording. Okay, yes, yeah, so exactly. So we've got the horns playing loud, super loud here. But then if we look at the let's say some of the instruments, because they come from, maybe we copy pasted from another section, we cannot have, you know, let's say we cannot have the horns playing super loud because it's the section that we are, for example, this is the epic section, the big climatic section, and we are recording the horns, and because we know we are in the climatic section, we are recording the horns, and we will record them obviously loud. but we have to also take a look of what's going on, what are the rest of the instruments doing, because maybe we copy pasted, we dragged another instrument from another section and it was playing piano. We cannot keep that one playing piano. We want to bring it up in volume, and so it matches everyone else's volume in that specific section, in this case a climatic section, so everyone should be playing accordingly loud. Okay. So my question here is, we've got the full. Let's take a listen to the brass 1 second. So we've got the horns. Let's take a listen here. So we've got two horn sections here, one to the left, one to the right. It's okay. It's a little bit more advanced. We changed the panning of the horns. It's okay, but why not having? I mean, if we've got the horns there, okay, it's nice. But then the brass section will sound like a brass section whenever we have it orchestrated and arranged and voiced the right way, and we need all the brass section instruments for it to sound like a full brass section. If we decide not to have trumpets because we don't want to go high in register, it's okay, but still, if we have got horns and tuba, we will need the trombones, the treble trombones and the bass trombones for it, to cover the gap between the horns and the tuba. Okay, maybe timbales as well would do a good job. Okay. Actually, the only trombone that we've got in all the piece, let's take a look here. Trombone. The only time the trombone is coming in is here, and it's for a high melody coming in here. Okay. So what I mean, if we are orchestrating, if we've got a 3 minutes piece, almost a 4 minutes piece, we have to make sure that it's very well designed in terms of a structure, and so the climaxes are also prepared. So we want to have the orchestration designed in a way that support the climaxes. Okay, and we cannot have just a trombone player. Imagine in a real situation, a trombone player in this big epic track would be sitting there for 95% of the track just playing a short solo, and where it goes big and where the trombones could actually provide a lot of good support for this to sound even bigger, they're just sitting listening to everyone else and not playing. And that's a poor use of this such a powerful section, which is so important, especially for this style of music. Okay. And so yeah, that the for this section we will need more double basses to support this this big climatic section. Where is it here? We cannot just have one tuba and very, very soft basses. We will need more stuff. We will need the louder double basses to support the rest of the instruments playing fortissimo. Maybe the chimbassos, the low trombone, some bassoons and contrabassoons for supporting the cellos and cellos and double basses, or maybe just some like a low woodwind patch. Okay, so second and third repetition, same thing. Yeah, it's what we've mentioned. And end here, getting to the end. Let's see what tracks do we have. So let's take a listen to how it connects. So now, at the end, when everyone goes down in volume, now it's the time where we have the lowest bigger brass that we've got. It comes in here. So we had like the low brass before it was basically a tuba. And now that everyone goes down in volume, we've got this cut. Then we've got a big low brass coming in. That doesn't make too much sense for like structure. You know, this type of brass sound, like this big brass sound, it would have made more sense in this part, and then maybe here having just the double bass and the soft tuba for this end section where we've got everyone going down. So no matter how we mix this part, it's always gonna sound bigger than this one. So this is a big problem here. We've got the tuba that we brought up in volume, which is making the whole thing sound fake, because it's just a tuba over, you know, sounding louder than everyone else, and it actually is just one tuba. And then we've got a big low brass section here that sounds in dynamic more forte than this one here, but in volume it's slower. So it's just it's opposite, and on top of that, this part it's coming in a softer section, which doesn't make that much sense for the listener standpoint. Okay, let's go down in dynamic and size accordingly. If everyone's going down in size, everyone should go down in size, not having a new section that it becomes bigger, artificially bigger in size. But on top of that, also that section that goes up in size, it goes down in volume. It's not gonna sound realistic. Okay, I would bring this part. I would bring up the high strings, and I would bring down the double high. The strings that you've got here. Let me grab them. The double high strings, I would bring them down, and the highs I would bring it up. It just 1 second here. This one I would bring it down. For this one, I would bring it up, and this one maybe down a little bit. But see. We want everything to sound compact and solid, and for that, the volumes have to be right. And that's something that we take care of while we are mixing, because we've got more control. Okay. Question here: the cello. Why the strings meet? Why? So we've got the big part here, and all of a sudden we've got this change of, you know, going to the next section. Why does the cello come in the second bar? If we've got the strings coming in, it would make sense. Maybe it's an artistic decision, but it just caught my attention. So that's it. And let's take a listen to this part here. Okay, yeah. And up at the end here, nice. This double hit here sounds very nice coming in this section, which actually helps closing this percussion. It works very nice closing this section before. For the viola solo cello, for the viola solo, bring it down a little bit in volume. Let me see more comments. Time. Yeah, that's it for the piece. More overall comments. Other comments. Structure-wise, I would keep it a little bit simpler. In general, this is, it's a complex structure. I would have kept it a little bit simpler. Make a short piece, because a long piece, it's just, it's too much going on. It's a 4 minutes piece. I would have gone with a 2 minutes piece, a shorter piece, simpler structure. And once you master that, we can do crazier things. And same thing with the standard orchestral arrangement. like having the left and right horns. It's cool. You can have stuff like that more advanced, but let's master first the solo, the standard orchestral structure, and yeah, that's about it. No high strings. So that's it. I said I was gonna do a before and after video where I would mix. Let me bring back. Where I would mix this so you could compare your mix and my mix. And I could try to fix most of these mistakes, like with all the balance mistakes. I could fix them with volume. The drops, I could try to compensate every single drop, but that wouldn't make you any good. Going back to the composing actually and rethinking this track is what is going to make you learn and approach then the mixing with a much solid arrangement. And then it's gonna be so much easier, because the mixing, it's not gonna make it change that much. It's about the right arrangement and the right syncastration. It doesn't mean that it's two things. It's you have to provide a great composition that's well arranged and it's well syncastrated, meaning that arrangement has to be done with samples, and syncastration techniques are what are gonna make our samples sound like the real orchestra. So it's a good composition arrangement and a good syncastration. And once fixed all the orchestration and syncastration problems, again, the mixing is gonna be so easy, because it's already gonna sound so awesome that the mixing is gonna make it sound even better. But it's gonna like fix anything. It's not like, okay, we're done composing. It sounds like, but I'll fix it during the mixing. No, and that's so problematic, because it's gonna make us try to fix things with mixing, and we are gonna apply too hard, too drastic of settings, because we are trying to compensate or to fix or to solve problems, and that's not what we can do with mixing, especially with orchestral music. It has to be done the proper way. It's like recording an orchestra that does a bad performance and then trying to fix it with the mixing. It's not gonna happen. We have to record it right. It's like even recording. Recording is about positioning the mics the right way, and getting a good performance out of the musicians. That's it. So that's the same thing that we have to get. We have to get a good performance out of our samples, and obviously before that's the syncastration part, getting a right performance out of our samples. But before that, it's the composing. No matter how the mics or the musicians are, if it's not a good composition, it's not gonna work. So the arranging part that we mentioned, it's got to be right before we approach syncastration and before we approach mixing. Okay. Again, this is a great track, but it doesn't have mixing problems. It has arranging and syncastration problems. Once we fix those, and once we are good to go with a good composition, well orchestrated and well syncastrated, the mixing is gonna be so easy and so much more fun, because we won't be fixing any mistakes. We will rather be enhancing what we already have. That's gonna be awesome.